right, welcome to Your Time, Your Money, the show where we value your time just as much as your money. Thank you so much for turning in today. Hopefully that we can provide some value and education to you as we always try to do. And today we're going to be talking about a great topic, and that is exactly what is diversification and what does that mean to you in your financial picture and your portfolio. So Matt, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mark. It's been too long, and we're excited to get this next show back on the road here. But I'm going to do a kind of little shout out here to our guy behind the scenes, Matt Byers. He knows how hot I get in the podcast room here, so I gotta stay hydrated, and I gotta stay nice and cool. And this little cloth is nice. Actually, it's for your phone, right? You just kind of wipe your phone off with it. But yeah, Byers is absolutely dominating the behind the scenes marketing, and there's some really cool stuff we're doing. I thought that was cool to kind of give him a big shout out. He's doing
and I got a great one here, a little
like little
purple and black color here for the Esli Group. So kudos to Mr. Byers, who always continues to impress and give us some valuable items that we can send out to our clients.
Well, I mean, he's my boss, so Byers is the boss according to almost everybody I work with. Hey, is your boss coming? I'm like, who are you talking about? Right? They're like, oh, that Byers guy. I'm like, oh, well, okay, yeah, he's the boss. I must dress really well. It must be what it is. So. I'm glad we're here, man. Yeah, we got a great program today, and I'm excited.
Yeah, an important topic, especially with the volatility we've seen in the market recently. Yeah. We want to make sure that people understand what is diversification and what does it mean to a portfolio to have proper diversification in a portfolio. So, with that being said, why don't you do the honors and we'll get started here.
You're up this time, man. I did it last time. You got the turn. So
sounds good. Your time,
your money. Let's get it going.
Great. We're on the clock, so let's bring some value to our clients and make sure that we have good conversation here. So,
sure.
When we talk diversification, a lot of times clients misunderstand diversification, and they think diversification is just that they had 7 mutual funds in their portfolio.
Got it.
And I think it's important to understand the difference between diversification and asset allocation, right?
Okay.
So asset allocation is, stocks versus bonds is the type of investment that you're in. And one of the things we want to focus on is just because you have 7 mutual funds in your 401k or your portfolio doesn't mean you're diversified.
Well, let's go one further. Ready? So I asked somebody, hey, do you have a 401k or do you have something through work? And they're like, yeah, I got a 401k. I'm like, what's in it? They're like, a 401k. And I'm like, wait, no. I'm like, where's the money? Where is it invested? And they're like, the 401k. So I think it's a great point for people to kind of know that next layer and understand, okay, the dollars are somewhere. They're invested somewhere. It could be in a cash account. It could be in a mutual fund or a stock or a bond. But it's good that we start this educational piece.
Yeah, and diversification, like you said, is not necessarily different accounts.
Correct.
Having a 401k, having a Roth, having a life insurance plan, that is not necessarily diversification. Yep. Because in the 401k, you could have a large cap mutual fund.
Got it.
In the Roth, you could have a large cap mutual fund, and same thing on its own in a non-retirement account. Well, right? But the average person would look at that and say, well, I got 3 different accounts.
I got a lot of diversification. I mean, let's take a big step back, right? What is a mutual fund? Well, how do we understand what a mutual fund is? Well, what's a stock, right? What's a bond? So as people look at, Yahoo Finance or a ticker or the NYSE, they see a ticker symbol, right? Apple, AAPL, or Google, right? That's an individual security. And I think, if you look at the research and you look at the history of how mutual funds came about, the lay investor who has $100, if I go take $100 and I invest it in one security, well, am I diversified?
Well, and especially if the security is like, a high cost.
Right. Like, so
you might only be able to buy half a share.
Let's say I buy security XYZ and it's $1,000 a share and I have $100. Well, if I give my money to my broker or whoever's buying it for me or E-Trade, I don't know, something, well, I only get 1/10 of a share. Well, it's going to have to go up, a gajillion amount for me to actually make some money. So why did mutual funds really come into existence? Well, it was for the lay investor to take down $100 and really spread it across a very large surface and get more from it. get more from that $100.
Yeah, and to an extent, a mutual fund diversifies you more than an individual security.
Right.
Usually within whatever asset class that mutual fund is designed to invest in.
I like the analogy of the grocery store. I like using the grocery store analogy. I love grocery stores to begin with. I'm a kid in a candy store. I like to walk around, get the free cookies. I go over to the guy handing out the special hot dogs. I'm like, get some of those, and I change my costume. I go back, get some more hot dogs. Anyways, the grocery store analogy, right? I walk down the aisle of the grocery store. I could buy one box of cereal, Lucky Charms, let's say. Or I can buy the entire aisle, but I proportionally own a little bit of each box of cereal. So when you start to think about diversification, a great way is to see it. Like I could see the cereal aisle. Everyone knows what it looks like. Well, I can buy one box, or I can buy a little bit proportionately of all the boxes. And I feel like that's a good way for people to see it.
Yeah, and exactly. And why do we want to diversify, right? Why do we want to diversify not just in stocks and not just in bonds, but with other asset classes? Because at any one period of time, one may outperform the other.
Sure.
One may go down and the other may not. And traditionally over years, people have described the stocks and bonds like a seesaw.
Seesaw is a great analogy.
You know, and where traditionally people would think as one side goes up, the other side goes down and vice versa. And that's where you see, most investment portfolios built off this stock bond relationship, but things have changed in our environment in the financial realm that kind of don't always make sense when it comes to a seesaw. We're at a period of time, right, where both stocks and bonds could go down at the same time.
And the mountain that has built them up, right? And that's, so let's think of the seesaw, but then have a mountain that comes up underneath it and potentially makes the seesaw lopsided. And that mountain is what? Growth. It's the market growing or shrinking based on what is happening in the world.
Yeah, so it's important to understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be a seesaw with two sides on it.
Right.
If you can, conceptually visualize a seesaw that maybe has 50 or 60 different seats on it.
Holy smokes, that's a big seesaw.
Right? If one side goes down, what happens? You've got maybe 20 or 30 other things that don't necessarily react the same way, or we would say in the investment world that are non-correlated, meaning they don't react the same in a different, in a market situation. So we want to make sure that there's non-correlated assets in that diversification.
I feel like the best and the first most important lesson I learned was from you when it comes to the non-correlated assets. And you made a comment to me about some people you had just sitting in cash, and they were sitting in cash for 5 years. And they were sitting in cash and not earning anything and not earning anything and not earning anything. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit, March 2019. And the market took a huge nosedive. And then all of a sudden, what did you do? You took those cash positions and did what?
It went very aggressive with them.
We got into the market and we diversified a different way. And then all of a sudden, within that 1 year, those gains just exploded. And a lot of people did that, right? So I feel like when you look at diversification, it's not just for a portfolio. It's not just within a portfolio. It's about time.
Yeah.
And it's about what you want, right?
And the important thing is when you have non-correlated assets, it also gives you a place to pull money from to then invest in assets that are down, right? The common adage that everybody says is buy low, sell high. Right? But very few people actually do that, right? Because
the emotion, right?
It's emotion, right?
Fear, the fear. We're back to fear again.
Every
like the fourth episode, fear, right?
But that emotion kicks in, and when they should be buying, a lot of times people don't buy because they don't have money that's in a different type of asset or on the sidelines,
or that they're willing to risk,
right? Opportunity money, right? The opportunity is only good if you have money for it,
or want to take the risk for that money.
Correct. And and as with any investment, you want to understand the risk associated with it. And one of the things that diversification helps you to do in addition to that is protect or hedge or protect your income in retirement.
Right. Well, there's two parts of income in retirement. We already did the income and retirement conversation, but there's assets and then there's income. And they're two totally separate areas, but people get really confused, especially once they retire, they want their 401k to keep growing. But they're retired. You're not contributing anymore. So that growth is going to change. So your mindset in retirement also has to change. What those dollars are diversified for, right? I mean, you could really dig down on that. There's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, and each asset class, so whether it's a stock or whether it's a bond or another type of investment, each asset class has its own risk associated with it.
It does.
And basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to disseminate where is the least amount of risk at a period of time.
Yep.
And where is the greatest opportunity for gain? And that's really what a good advisor is trying to do with their clients. They're trying to maintain the risk portfolio of a client. So if a client is more of a moderate conservative investor, they're trying to maintain that risk profile, diversify them to protect them, but also diversify them to give them opportunity to get a better return if they can.
Well, I had a real light bulb moment in conversations with another advisor, and talking about a Roth IRA and a Roth IRA owning a security rather than a bond or a mutual fund. And I had a light bulb moment where I was like, wow, if I put money into my Roth IRA from earned income and then buy a security that explodes, my risk is really high because I'm buying something that's speculative. But if it does explode, all the growth in my Roth IRA is what?
Now tax-free.
It's all tax-free. So that I had that light bulb moment where, I didn't think about it until I became a little more savvy and a little more, had a couple stripes. But the truth is, you're like, okay, wow, that's a really good idea. But the question is, are you willing to take on that risk? Are you willing to divert? Because diversification works with aggressiveness and conservativeness. It works both ways.
Exactly. And one of the things people have to understand with diversification is that as their assets grow, as they get larger net worths, larger liquid net worths, larger investment assets, is you want to start looking at different things that perhaps you maybe hadn't considered.
Right. There's more than just a market, right?
And we're never going to be an advisory practice that says, no, you can't do this or no, you can't do that because we don't deal with it.
Right.
And you see that a lot. Like, oh, don't trade in crypto or don't trade in precious metal or whatever because
or don't do a Roth conversion,
because we don't do that on our platform.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to justify every reason for you not to do it. But the way I see it is diversification is like a diet, right? You could eat broccoli your whole life, and broccoli's supposed to be the best thing for you, right? But eventually, if you eat too much broccoli, something bad's going to happen.
Well, you're circling around the magic word here: moderation.
Moderation.
Moderation. You don't want to eat 40 Snickers bars, but you don't want to eat 5 pounds of broccoli because either way, you potentially will die, right? Moderation is a critical word. And utilizing fear with moderation helps us develop a great plan.
In diversification.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, even your diversification has to have moderated risk.
I feel they're kind of one and the same. They do the same thing. It's just making sure that you have a spread based on the size of your portfolio, because people forget about this, right? If I have $10,000, should I spread my portfolio across 30 mutual funds? Probably not. It's probably not the best idea to do that, right? And I've had, again, I love going back to the real world situations. We've had people before where there's $30,000 or $40,000 and they're buying 15 mutual funds. And I'm like kind of looking and I'm like, well, okay, like this is a choice you're making. And sometimes you could over diversify. You're not getting as much traction as you normally would.
And one of the great things that helps us out with understanding where a client's at is we have a great program. It's called AdviceWorks at Cetera.
Oh man, it's phenomenal.
And what that allows us to do is import, not necessarily just the assets that they have with us with Cetera, but also to be able to import and link things that they might have in their 401k, bank account information, and then incorporate all that into a Morningstar illustration that allows us to see almost like an x-ray of a portfolio.
Sure.
It allows us to delve deeper into a portfolio, look at what percentage is stock versus bond, U.S. versus domestic,
international,
industrial,
right? Small cap, mid cap, emerging markets.
And totally analyze the risk of a portfolio, right? Look at the beta of a portfolio, see the average durations of bonds.
Breaking out the big words, watch out. People's heads are spinning.
So, one of the things that I would encourage people to do is take a snapshot of your entire financial picture when you're considering diversification.
Yep.
Don't just look at your 401k, don't just look at your individual Roth in a confined bubble and say, am I diversified?
Right.
You have to pair all those investments together to see if you're truly diversified.
And sometimes people don't have access to something that they could use like that. They don't have an AdviceWorks. So a lot of people have to do it manually. I'm on a spreadsheet, or I'm on, again, Yahoo Finance, and I'm typing in tickers. Sometimes it's hard to track. So whoever you do work with, if it is somebody, make sure you have a comprehensive site where you have security and you can put stuff in, again, informed consumer, right? And make sure you're making good choices with your dollars, right?
Yeah, and then a lot of individual investors don't even know how to read those sheets.
Right.
You know what I mean?
The next step,
so they might look at it and say, well, it looks pretty and it looks diversified.
Right.
But when they delve into the detail on it, they may not be.
Sure.
Right. So, so we want to always focus on that. And I think what's important to understand is the risk that has built up in today's environment that hasn't been there in years. And, one of the biggest risks that we find is in the bond market.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen an extended period of time where the federal government have kept rates historically low.
Historically low, buying a
And
ton of bonds.
As rates go down, right, bonds go up.
Sure.
And
Well, as interest rates go down,
the
face value of bonds go up depending on how long their duration is, right?
So we're at a period of time with inflation creeping in and the Fed talking about raising rates here and pretty substantial, that bond side of the portfolio, which has traditionally been the more conservative side in most cases, has the potential to go down.
Oh, a tremendous potential. I mean, as interest rates go up, yields go up, right? But the face value of bonds go down, especially if a lot of people are holding very long duration bonds. You could see a tremendous drop in the face amount of your portfolio if you have a lot of bonds.
Yeah. So, having to look outside of the realm of a traditional stock versus bond portfolio is very important, especially in today's environment.
Yeah.
And there's products out there that a lot of companies offer some buffer protection on the downside.
Sure.
There's other categories that people should be including in their diversification. So, perhaps it's precious metal, right? But we all know gold prices can go down as well.
Oh,
but,
my God.
They could bring in, other investments, buffered ETFs, buffered annuities. But, there's a ton of other investments out there that people can bring in.
Just like buffered ETFs, there's leveraged ETFs where you can take on more risk, right? So there's a flavor for everybody out there. The question is, are you having the conversation of what's going to happen? The when, and when it does happen, what's it going to look like, right? Anticipation. Why is Spider-Man my favorite Marvel character? Why is he my favorite?
Spandex?
No, he's not in spandex, Mark. Oh my God. They're all in spandex, man. He's vulnerable, right? Just like our portfolios. But one thing he does better than any other superhero, he anticipates. The Spidey sense, right? The Spidey sense is the most prolific, historical as it comes to like comic book heroes, the most important trait that a comic book hero has because he thinks he knows what's going to happen. He can anticipate the next move. That's what a good advisor does. That's what a good portfolio does. It steps ahead. It doesn't step behind.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And the other context in diversification is you want to be working with a financial professional because the things you diversify into still need to accomplish the goals you've set.
Right.
So your goal may be for income. That may eliminate some of the items that you would diversify into because you still need to provide income for you, your spouse, and your household.
Yeah.
Right. So a good advisor is going to take that into consideration and what's the ultimate goal and where can we find diversification but still achieve the goal.
Right. No, I mean, you're spot on. And sometimes, again, we'll go back to the fear, saying words that people don't understand, like ETF or annuity or life insurance, trying to unpack those words and understanding what is this for, right? I feel like sometimes it's the best course of action because I know I've talked to some people where I explain it and I explain what the word is and I don't say the word and all. They're like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then I say the word and it's like, no, I don't want to do that. It's like, why? What happened? What was the change? And usually it revolves around fear.
Yeah, and and then just taking a step back to the topic we talked about, and that's the different plans people have and confusing that with diversification.
Oh yeah.
Each individual portfolio, when you say 401k or 403b or Roth IRA, think of them as empty boxes.
They're like buckets.
Right, they're like buckets, and you can put all different types of investments in them.
Tons of them.
Right.
Depending on what's available.
Yeah, we've run into people that have had a Roth, but the Roth is invested in CDs.
Oh my God, absolutely.
We've had people that have a Roth, but the Roth is invested in individual securities, stocks, bonds, or what have you.
Let's do a real world. I met a gentleman with a Roth that's invested in a CD that's making 0.25%. 0.25. And I looked and I was like, is there something better we can diversify into that might make you more money? That's just as good, right? And just let that person do the math on it. So it's important to know that there's a lot of different registrations, which we've talked about.
And then also the other thing to consider in diversification is with certain asset classes, like you alluded to before, you may want to have certain asset classes that you're diversifying with in a Roth versus something else.
Right.
You may want to have the more aggressive, the more growth potential assets in a Roth IRA.
That would make sense because it's the longest hold.
You may want to have items that declare traditionally maybe more capital gains in a deferred vehicle than you would on their own, where you're going to pay a lot of capital gain taxes on them potentially.
Well, let's take a deeper dive here on diversification. If I don't have a pension and I'm a business owner, where should I be diversifying some of my dollars? Into a pension for myself. Flexing dollars into a pension-like vehicle from age 30 to 60, really takes pressure off of what?
The investments.
Correct. So I have to think as a business owner, I have to think differently than if I'm a pension earner. Because as a business owner, my income might be unlimited, but my time in the field is also limited. So guess what also we have to diversify? We have to diversify time, right? And what we do with it. Because a lot of people, they get hung up, especially if they're business owners, and there's a lot of them out there. They get hung up in this world of, I'm just going to rely on my investments. And then all of a sudden, when it comes time to needing the money, COVID, war, right? A recession. Oh boy, what do we do now? Guess what? Guess I'm going to have to keep working.
Well, the thing that listeners need to understand is when you truly understand diversification, it takes a lot of the fear away.
The fear goes away.
You're right. How many times have you heard a client call and say, well, the market's down, I'm going to lose everything? Right? And one of my common response to them is, well, what market are you talking about?
Which one?
Right? Because not every investment is technically what they're considering the market.
Down. Right. They just see what's on the news and they see the ticker, for the Dow 30. Oh, it's down 200 points. I'm losing everything.
Exactly. So just having a client understand diversification and what it means is very important, because once they understand how things react to each other and to different events in the market, there's a little bit more confidence in being able to ride out a market cycle.
Sure.
Right? Now, that would be different is if every investment was in the same asset class. Right? Imagine 100% of your money tied to the individual stock market, and you're going through a period of time like we're going through now where there's a lot of volatility. That's very,
again,
dangerous.
time, right? Time. If I'm 20 years old, I can take that risk potentially. But if I'm 70, about to retire, I can't.
Yeah, but even if you want to take that, to your point, even if you're younger and you can take the risk, wouldn't it be more prudent to have diversification that you can then dollar cost average in
back in, right,
with extra money that was on the sidelines?
So to that 20-year-old, some having that bank account asset, right, or having that non-correlated asset makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, I think once a client understands that, it doesn't remove the fear, but it makes them more comfortable with the fluctuation in their account.
Well, to see that there's more steps to take. It's not just one step, right? I can't just take one step and say, yep, I'm good, right? There's multiple steps you need to take.
Correct.
So, okay. Yeah, I like it.
Well, we're at an important part of our podcast here, obviously, and that's our community spotlight time. So we're excited about that. This is always a period of time where we highlight a business in the area. One that we encourage clients to look at in a different light, maybe tell you a little bit about the business itself and kind of what they do out there. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about actually a business that advertises probably more than any other business in the area that I know of.
They got a really good catchphrase on there.
They got their own catchphrase.
I wish our marketing guy could find a catchphrase for us like this.
But that's Martin Harding and Manzotti. They're 1-800-LAW-1010, and the reason I wanted to bring them up is I've known Paul Harding for a while, and Paul's a great guy, and I think one of the things that people don't see about their practice over there is they do the hurt in a car accident, right? You're going to call them.
Martin Harding does it again.
But they're not, people don't realize that how much they give back to the community.
Oh,
and Paul's been involved in numerous charities that I've been in for the years. He's helped out with the Kidney Foundation. He's a graduate of the area. He's been in the Capital District his whole life, graduated from Albany Law School. But they just moved locations. Most people know that they were on Route 7 up here in Latham.
Right.
They just moved down to 1 Wall Street, so just kind of off New Carner Road in Albany. And so they got a brand spanking new location, which is great. They've been in business for 28 years, and everybody kind of knows the number, but I'll say it anyway. It's a 1-800-LAW-1010. Once again, 1 Wall Street, Albany, New York. The other nice thing that Paul's been involved in is the Humane Society.
Oh yeah,
he's a big advocate for the Humane Society as well as the Legal Project, and that's to bring legal services to nonprofits, individuals that need free legal services and things along that line. So we just wanted to give him a shout out because
absolutely. I mean, I can do a personal experience. My wife got hit by a car. A gentleman hit her, and they gave her first class treatment. Man, I mean, they didn't even know who she was, and she called in, and they treated her great. So I mean, we've had a personal experience with them, and they were fantastic. We were on the phone within an hour and had everything done and fixed up within a month or two. So they were fantastic.
Yeah, so great shout out to them, and just a little different light than what you see on their normal advertisements and commercials. So it's always great to highlight them. So once again, Community Spotlight Time, a very important part of our podcast series. So let's move on to diversification a little bit more. Let's talk about protecting income with diversification.
That's a really good area that people miss on a lot, is when they forget that they have to take pressure. I mean, the seesaw, right? Let's go back to the seesaw. Taking pressure off of your portfolio by developing earlier thoughts on income in retirement is going to help mitigate that risk later on, right? And relying on that, okay, I have to go up 15% this year because, I mean, we did sequence of returns already. And I feel like you said beta a little while ago, and a lot of people don't know what that word is, right? That real internal driver of a portfolio. But the truth is the lower we can have the beta in a portfolio, the better it is for diversification. That means if your beta, the closer your beta is to zero, the better we've spread you out as it comes to what you're looking at for what your plan is potentially.
Yeah, and that diversification in income is also important. And part of that diversification, which people don't think about when they talk about asset classes, is did you diversify your decision making with things like your pension and Social Security?
Right.
Or did you lock into just one option? Right? And that's something that needs to be considered because the risk you take might not necessarily be prudent because you didn't do your planning right with Social Security. What I mean by that is let's say you locked into Social Security at age 62.
Okay.
But that benefit wasn't enough really for you. What do you have to do? You have to take more risk to generate the income difference.
To offset what your costs are now.
Yeah, right? So if you get that type of planning right, and maybe you build in some other types of fixed income underneath that, to get you to your need, maybe not your want, but your need in your household, it alleviates a lot of that pressure on your investments having to perform.
Well, let's do the complete opposite scenario, right? I don't need Social Security. I don't need the income. Like, let's say me and my spouse are married, all of our bills are paid, we both have pensions, and we don't need the income. Well, I could take Social Security and then I could leverage it into something else and diversify.
I can reinvest it.
My Social Security payment into a LERP or into an annuity, a flex pay annuity, right? I could do something that would help make sure that my benefit's going to be there for my wife. And honestly, Mark, I've had a very personal situation where I commented to a very close dear friend who passed, and he said this exact scenario. They didn't need Social Security, and he was 62. And I said, take your Social Security and leverage it into a LERP. It's going to be like $2,000 a month. Okay, and this hits home for me. This is hard to talk about. This is not easy. And that $2,000 a month would have netted about $1 million plus in death benefit. The month after he hit Social Security age, he passed. So we would have done the app. Everything would have been done. He would have made one payment. And his wife would have received $1 million tax-free. And it was seamless. And this is where, again, the fear of taking a step, the paralysis by analysis, right? Of taking a step because there's so many options. When you don't need income, diversify. What else could you do? When you do need it, you need to think bigger. What do I need to do to make sure I have enough? Sorry, I didn't mean to jump on the story, but I think it was timely because a lot of people that happens to,
Perfect example. And, and I'm going to go, one step further with why you want to diversify between products or actually, let me rephrase that. Why you want to diversify between vehicles, right? Imagine all of your money pre-tax.
Oh boy.
Right?
Again, the seesaw, right? I can just see it like this.
So most advisors talk about diversification in asset classes and things along that lines. But if all your money's pre-tax, that creates a lot of problems down the road.
Tons.
Because if that money is deferred and deferred and deferred, and in your case where maybe there's two pension earners with both Social Securities and they don't need that asset,
so it just
what
grows.
are they going to do? They're going to defer it and divert and defer it.
72.
And eventually there's going to be the required minimum distribution.
Sure.
Right? We want to have some type of tax strategy associated with that. Right? We want to diversify that money, not necessarily all pre-tax, but into after-tax vehicles, tax-managed vehicles, things that can maybe fund trusts, things along that lines. Imagine going into retirement and you're not diversified in vehicles. And you call and you say, hey, I need to pull out $70,000 for that new F Ford 150.
I want to buy it.
It is, right?
Right, because there's none on the lots right now.
Right, so you're going to go in there and you're going to go back and forth with the sales guy. You're going to try to get him down to $69,000 from $70,000, whatever that vehicle is. You spend an hour doing that, and then you go and call your advisor and you say, hey, I need to get to $69,000.
Yep.
And you didn't diversify your vehicles out, and now they have to take it all from pre-tax. Well, your advisor is going to have to take out maybe $85,000, $87,000
To get to
So
69.
you net the 69.
You got to pay the Fed and you got to pay
So
state.
you just wasted an hour arguing with the salesman to lower the price 1,000 to then go and liquidate 16 grand more out because now you have to pay taxes on it, right? Let's replay that scenario though. Now let's say you have a sizable amount of money because you've diversified between not only a pre-tax but also a Roth IRA
or life insurance or whatever.
or other investment vehicles. It's a much different conversation when you call the advisor and say, hey, I need to get to 69 grand. They can have an intelligent conversation with you now and say, well, let's look at what you made for the year. And let's maybe do 75% of it from the Roth. Let's do 15% from your IRA. And let's do the remainder from your non-retirement.
Do a March 2019. You buy the same truck and the market's down 35%. And you haven't diversified within vehicles.
So now you have to sell.
Now you have to sell pre-tax all the money that you didn't want to get rid of.
And heaven forbid you're all stock when the market's down.
40%.
Now you're doing the opposite of what common sense tells you, right? Buy low, sell high. Now you have to sell low because you need the money.
I need the money for health. I need the money for a car. That's why I think zooming out, I want you to say that again. Diversify not only between the actual things in your portfolio,
The asset classes.
right? But then diversify with the vehicle.
With the vehicles.
Roth, traditional, those are different.
Right? And that's the same in income planning too. Maybe you want to diversify between dividend paying securities
Sure.
and other securities that may be paying income through a rider. Or maybe they pay income because of the product structure they are, like an
Maybe
annuity.
we deferred the income, right?
Yep.
We waited 5 years and we took some now and some later.
Correct. So, that and I think that's where diversification gets lost is people just stop at the asset class.
Right.
They just stop at the stock versus
Oh,
bond.
I'm spread out. I have some emerging markets. I have some international. I have some domestic growth. I'm good. I'm all set, right? There's that. I'm all set again.
Yep. And we're going to get into a later session, but right, how do people pick their diversification in a portfolio?
Most times, honestly, I'm going to look at something that I know. I see the whatever fund that I'm most comfortable with. I check that box.
Yeah. And most
Right.
people don't even know what fund they're comfortable in.
Right.
They pick their choice because of the past return, right? Past return doesn't,
Predict the next return,
predict
right?
the next
Yeah.
return, and they go and they say, "Ooh, this one averaged XYZ for the last 5 years.
14%,
It's
wow.
got to be good, and it's got to be worth me getting into." As opposed to, hey, based on my time frame to retirement, should I be in this investment?
Right.
Right. And then the other thing they do, right, is the water cooler talk. We talk about this all
Oh
the time.
man, every time. I feel like we bring this up every episode. The water cooler talk, right? Hey, I'm doing this, so you should do it too.
Yeah. Yep. Where did you get your diversification advice? Well, I got it from my coworker. What's he do for a living?
He drinks coffee with me at the water cooler. It's great. We talk about this and we joke about it, but I've had plans completely fall apart because of Joe at the water cooler, right? And Joe's talking to me, and Joe said to me that he does term insurance and I shouldn't do whole life. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, hold on a sec. You're a pension owner and he's not. He's an independent contractor. What's the difference? I get what you're saying, and I think the most important message: diversify is important, and having the conversation is even more important.
Yeah, and back to my point of diversifying with other vehicles.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's look at a different situation.
Go ahead.
Let's look at, say, grandparents
Okay.
that are going to be gifting money to grandkids. Right. It's very important that they diversify into different vehicles than what they think about. So a lot of times grandparents will do what? Maybe they'll go get the passport savings account.
Got it. I'm going to drop some money
Right.
in
In
the
the
savings.
kid's name.
Sure.
Right. Or they'll go and buy, EE bonds in the kid's name or things along that lines.
Yep.
Right. They're not thinking about diversification in the sense of, is this going to show on my FAFSA for my financial aid form for when the kid goes to college,
My Pell, right?
For your grant or whatever that might be, and diversifying into different assets that may shelter those assets from some of those forms is also very important.
Yeah.
And what I find is grandparents want to do a lot of different accounts for the grandkids. They just don't know what to do.
Right. Anyway, sometimes, again, having that conversation, should I do a 529? Should I do life insurance? Should I buy a stock and put it into an individual or UGMA, something to that effect?
Yeah, and that's why people should meet with an advisor, is to look at all those different nuances to gifting to the grandkids. Maybe you're doing a legacy account to them.
Yeah.
Maybe you're diversifying between products so that later when you go to buy the vehicle,
It's ready.
it's ready for you.
You have it. The time, not timing. I feel like, again, that's something I've learned in my experiences in this world. The money that you need tomorrow, again, I love the grocery store analogy. Everyone's seen the conveyor belt at the grocery store, right? Well, the money that you need tomorrow is about to fall into the bag. And the money that you don't need for 15 years is way back on the other end. Because all that time of it moving forward is going to give the advisor in your corner the ability to diversify.
Yeah.
But if you need that money today and we plan for it to be down here, that's a bigger problem.
Right.
Now you're going to put stress on a portfolio and you're going to cause yourself pain and you're going to have to sell when you shouldn't sell.
Yeah.
So.
And the other topic we should talk about with diversification is diversifying as you grow.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, initially when you start saving and you only have, like you said, $5,000 or $3,000 or something, it's hard to really diversify.
It's difficult.
I mean, you can get into a blended fund, but you're still limited with your diversification. But one of the things, even with people with high net worth, that I always try to, practice or implement into their plans, is, are we making investments fund other investments?
Right.
Most people don't realize that a lot of times investments reinvest all the time, but they don't have to.
You could remit.
They can remit,
dividends.
or think of it like this: cross reinvest it into something else that's going to diversify them more. So it's not their own money coming out of their paycheck.
You ready for a great analogy here? If I own, I read this great article. If I own, I think it was 80 shares of Starbucks coffee, the dividend is big enough to buy me Starbucks coffee every day. Right? I forget now. I mean, it's obviously different now. But if I own X amount of shares of Starbucks coffee, X amount of shares of Starbucks, because of the dividend they have, every time they pay a dividend, it's going to buy me coffee every day.
Yeah.
It's enough to pay
Now, that's
for it.
not an endorsement for Starbucks
It
to buy
is
you
not
coffee.
at all, but
Because you might not care for Starbucks coffee.
You might like Dunkin' Donuts or Cumbies because it's $1 a cup and Starbucks is $14.
But to the point,
They help a Frappuccino though.
yeah, and there's tons of investments out there that pay dividends, or have return. But the point is if you can use that, if you can leverage those dividends, cross reinvest them somewhere else to diversify your portfolio out, you can be in a much better situation.
Do the one you talked to the first. I remember this conversation. I had this conversation with you 5 years ago. Do the one with the tax-free bonds and just do an example on the muni bonds and paying for the real estate. Because when you did that example for me, it changed my life, the way I thought about dividend cross reinvesting.
Yeah, so some concepts that you can do is, for instance, let's say somebody has an interest to get into real estate.
I got $1 million.
Right. And real estate isn't necessarily for everybody, right? I mean, there's so many,
tough.
and there's different ways to get into it, to be honest with you. But, if you can have a dividend from an account, and it can be anything, it doesn't have to be municipal bonds.
Well, do the one I mean, that was a real world, right?
If you have a dividend coming from a municipal bond fund, say,
sure,
and you live in that state,
exempt, right?
If I live in that state, yeah.
So I'm a New York resident. I got $1 million. Here you go. I want to buy real estate. What do I do?
So if that's something that can be put into a municipal bond fund, and perhaps that's that state of that you live in,
sure,
then that dividend could theoretically pay for the mortgage on the property that you're doing. And in some cases where the mortgage rates are so low, it may be more than enough that's necessary to do that. There's a thing that's diversifying you. It's giving you rental income. It's giving you, another asset, being real estate or property, that can provide income for you. Now, that obviously is just a scenario that people could do.
It's not a real world, but it's a scenario.
But, the point is that there's a concept where you can have dividends come in to help increase your net worth or increase your portfolio altogether.
Yep.
Now, obviously, there's risks associated with municipal bonds. There's risk associated with real estate. That's just an example. But that's a perfect example of not necessarily having your money reinvested, but having it work for you in diversification.
Your money's working for you, whereas at a bank account, it's really not working for you. I mean, it's there for the opportunity when the market does go down and you can get money off the sideline. But, and I'm not going to apologize for it, but a lot of times, everyone out there that's listening, I put Mark on the spot because the second you get put on the spot, where do you draw from? Your past experience. You draw from what you know. And I always like making the analogy, and I'll do this for you because you're a great practitioner, Mark. When you go to a doctor's office and the doctor's not there, what is it? It's just an office. When it becomes a doctor's office is when the doctor shows up because he brings his experience with him. And sometimes people forget that. And that's why the Joe at the water cooler talk, I'm hoping to kind of condemn that, because Joe at the water cooler doesn't have as much experience as a guy that's been in it for 20 years and has seen the stuff you've seen. Just like if you broke your arm, right? Go back to the Wendy's. And I love Wendy's, by the way. I'm not going to go to Wendy's to get my arm looked at. Where am I going to go? I'm going to go to Malta Emerging Care because they're going to be able to set my arm and take an x-ray. So,
well, and I've said it before numerous times, is how many times do you do something for the first time and you get it exactly right?
Time.
Very seldom does that happen.
Correct.
But you know what? When you're working with somebody that has years of experience or a team, right? Because we have multiple advisors on our team. We have multiple people that we can rely on for resources. Those teams have been through all different experiences.
So we've diversified. Isn't that great?
Diversified our
We've
team
diversified. When people ask me, Matt, what if you're dead? I said, well, you get to work with Adam, or you get to work with Mark, or you get to work with any one of the other licensed representative we have on our team.
Yep.
So
talking
about diversification, we already have it.
That's another form of diversification, right, for the client. So, I think we covered a lot of hot topics today.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the one thing that we want to do is recap what clients should take away.
Absolutely. Let you start. Go ahead.
So, obviously, recap, diversification is key, right? But number one, you have to be diversified in different asset classes.
Yep.
Right. First and foremost, you can't all be in the same asset class. You want asset classes that are correlated and non-correlated to each other.
Got it.
And those non-correlated assets are ones that just act differently in different market risk conditions.
Okay. And I think you hit it on the head. You also want to diversify with your income and how do I generate income? Because there's a lot of ways to generate income. And sometimes, again, the fear and the uncomfortableness of doing something different is going to be a little bit hard of a hurdle to jump over. But again, with the right guidance, with the right person in your corner, you could do it. It could happen.
And it's not always one check that gets you to retirement. Sometimes it's what I call nickel and diming retirement.
The streams of income.
You got 300 coming from this investment, you got a 500 from this, 1,000 from this, your pension, this and that. And then when you add them all up, you have a really nice income for you in retirement.
And you can rely on those things differently based on what's happening in the market.
And then in closing, obviously recapping, we want to diversify among vehicles.
Yeah,
we want
huge.
to make sure there's different vehicles doing different things and having different advantages for you.
There's going to be a lot of listeners out there right now that are like, vehicles, I don't understand what he's saying. If you're a listener, if you have only IRA money, you need to call either us or another advisor and get in touch and start talking about tax implications. What's going to happen if I die? What's going to happen to my kids? How do they get that money out? X, Y, Z. That's got to happen. That's a bigger conversation.
What's going to happen when I buy a car in retirement?
Right. That's going to be a linear conversation.
Yep. So some key points, cool. Let's obviously switch gears a little bit. Let's, go into our last thing here, which is always minute by minute.
Yeah.
Any hot topics you see coming up that you want to discuss?
I'm transparent. I'm an open book. And I'm going to tell you what, there's been a couple really cool spots. My kids and I have been doing a lot of painting. We've been painting our minis, and we go downstairs. I get them out of mom's hair, and we paint our minis. And we have minis, these little characters. We play D&D once in a while. There's actually a really cool game for kids that's very friendly for kids to play. And it's actually a linear game. It's very straightforward. You could do it on your iPad, or you could do it on like a map. But I think it's very great because the art of the tabletop game was lost for a long time, and technology kind of killed it. But it's making a huge comeback. Huge comeback, tabletop games. And Twitch, and there's live streams of stuff happening. So
even just a traditional game.
Just a Monopoly, like everything's got to be upgraded. There's no more theater of the mind. There's no more like imagination, right? Like
I've seen in some of the stores out there though, you can get like, those boards done in wood.
Right.
Really nicely presented, nicely.
I'm a big time advocate of getting my kids to use their imaginations and be hands-on and be thoughtful when you play a game, because that's a lost art, man. It's like going and letting your kids play in the playground. They're like, what do? I don't know what to do. Go play. What's that? Go pick up a rock and throw it. Just don't hit a window.
Diversification and activities for your kids, right?
Don't just sit on the iPad, man.
See, the diversification goes everywhere.
Go do something, right? Anyways, that's been a hot topic for us. I mean, we really enjoyed it as a family. It's a great, it's weird. Friday night we sat there and it was so quiet and everyone was just like painting, and I looked around and I was like, wow, this is like serenity, man. This is nice. No one's screaming. There's no iPad. There's no pulling of hair. There's no SpongeBob in the background. I want to kill SpongeBob. Right?
Hobbies and crafts are always fun in our household. We always put the clear shower curtain down, so when all the paint drops on the floor, we
just do a garbage bag. It's easier. Just pull it up and throw it away. We're good.
Excellent. So, great seeing you today.
Awesome.
Let's tell clients how they can get hold of us if we want.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna let you do that. You
43 British American Boulevard, first floor, Latham, New York, 12110. If you want to reach us by phone, you can dial 800-222-3202. Obviously, we're the Esley Group within Cetera Investors. And then you can always see us at yourtimeyourmoney.net. And remember, that's .net for your net worth. So
Love it, man.
very happy to have you tune in today. And we'll bring you some more value in our next session. Hope all's well. Matt, good to see you.
Good to see you. It's
Take care.
always your time,
Your money.
all right, man. See ya.